Hello everybody, I'm Eternal Flame here, and welcome to what's going to be another theory that I have come up with for JJK, mainly because of something I saw on Twitter recently, which is a very interesting question. Why didn't Kenjaku raise Yuji? Because the actual question was how strong Yuji would be if they were raised by Kenjaku, but that led me down the rabbit hole of thinking, why didn't Kenjaku raise Yuji? Which, by the way, to answer that first question, I'm going to answer it in another way, in the same way that I answered it on Twitter. I want you guys to remember the fact that Yuji was able to get as strong as he did under a year with only some very powerful opponents pushing him. Now you're giving him Kenjaku, someone who can spawn in really good opponents, is going to have much more time to train with him, and has over 1,000 years of curse energy experience. I'm going to let you figure out how strong Yuji would become from that knowledge alone in comparison to what he would be now. Now the reason why that I'm actually making this video is because this question made me think about a lot of things, more in particular, why didn't Kenjaku raise Yuji? Because when you really think about it, there is no reason whatsoever that Kenjaku shouldn't have raised Yuji. In fact, there's only benefits to Kenjaku raising Yuji. Kenjaku wanted Yuji to be the signal for the storm, the signal for the age of curses to begin, and be the perfect vessel for Sukuna. Or at least that's what he tells Choso, which might imply that there's actually more of what Yuji's true purpose is, but that's beside the point. So if he actually just trained Yuji himself with someone like Yuji already having massive amounts of curse energy potential, and trained him and raised him as his own, then he would have been perfect for this role, perfect to become the ultimate vessel for Sukuna, and just turned Yuji into this killing machine that would be extremely useful for Kenjaku's future plans. It's not like he needed Yuji to be adopted into Jujutsu High or anything either, because his plans still would have likely gone on without a hitch if he didn't do that. If anything, it might have actually gone better for him. It's not like Gojo needed to be aware of him either, and it's not like anyone was really hunting Kenjaku down either. Especially because keeping Yuji on his own is also a massive gamble. Like, there is no guarantee that Yuji was actually going to eat Sukuna's finger right then and there. After all, Yuji eating Sukuna's finger, I'm not going to lie, was more luck-based than anything else. If Megumi, for example, decided to use one of his stronger Shikigami like Nue, which he had access to, there's a pretty good chance he never would have actually ended up eating the finger, and Megumi would have been fine and just carried them from there. Or that he went on another gamble that Gojo would potentially spare Yuji's life when Yuji being alive is something very, very necessary for Kenjaku's plan to start and work. So it really made me question, why didn't Kenjaku raise him? Is it because of a plot making him dumb, or was there actually a reason that might have come of why Kenjaku didn't try and raise Yuji himself? Now, I think the actual reason is mainly because of the fact that Gege didn't have in mind until later into the story that Yuji was going to be Kenjaku's kid, because if that's the case, it makes a lot of this actually make sense. However, I think there might actually be in-story justification for why Kenjaku might have chosen to not raise Yuji Itadori, other than, well, Kenjaku just being dumb. But I doubt that Kenjaku, the guy who's been around for 1,000 years and manipulating everyone, is actually dumb enough to not raise Yuji Itadori when it would be absolutely perfect for his plans, unless there was something stopping him. So I began to think, what could have been potentially stopping him? After all, there weren't many people strong enough for a long while to actually stop Kenjaku, and the one or two people who I can think of that might have been strong enough to stop him either would not have been aware of Kenjaku or just wouldn't have cared enough to actually stop him. For example, I don't see how Gojo could have ended up stopping him, because Gojo had no idea about Yuji until Megumi brought him. So yeah, I don't see any reason why Kenjaku waited so long, unless there was someone there near Yuji that was actually forcing him to have to wait that long. Now this is when we're going to get into probably one of my deepest crackpot theories I've had in a long while. However, if you do enjoy these types of crackpot videos, then now this will be very, very fun. Anyway, the reason why I'm bringing all of this up is because I do actually believe there was someone stopping him from raising Yuji Itadori, someone who Kenjaku didn't want to mess with for some reason, and that person is Yuji Itadori's grandpa. Now, there are some really interesting things that I noticed about Jujutsu Kaisen when I actually started to reread things for this theory. Number one, the cursed spirit that was sent out by Kenjaku in order to set up the circumstance for Yuji Itadori to eat the finger, which we do actually find out in the battle against Choso that this was all Kenjaku's manipulation, it wasn't actually luck-based. Something very interesting about it and its timing happens, which is the fact that it only actually happens after Wasuke Itadori is dead. I have no idea if I'm saying the name right, so for the rest of this video I am just going to refer to him as Yuji Itadori's grandpa, so I'm just going to rely on you guys to correct me if I'm saying it right or not, like usual. Now, if that was the only little bit of evidence, I would say that's just massive coincidence at best. However, that's not really my only piece of evidence as to why he might have actually been what was keeping Kenjaku away. Another thing that was very interesting, at least to me, is the fact that Kenjaku Kenjaku around them was somewhat trying to actually hide their identity and pretend to be Kaori Itadori. Even though Yuji's grandfather was actually aware of the fact that it was truly not Kaori Itadori but it was Kenjaku now, he was still trying to impersonate and fool him in order to think that it truly was Kaori Itadori. More importantly, Yuji's grandfather was actually trying to tell Yuji about who his parentage was, about his family before he died, but he unfortunately died before he could let out those last words, instead of letting Yuji down the path by telling Yuji to make sure he doesn't die for himself, but he dies for others, to make sure that Yuji ends up being someone to try and help other people get good deaths so they don't die alone like how he's gonna die alone, and more importantly, to make sure that Yuji Itadori isn't going to die alone. So a mix of the fact that Yuji Itadori's grandpa seems to be aware of sorcery to some level of degree, he knows the fact that Kaori is not truly Kaori but Kenjaku, because he was going to tell Yuji about that until Yuji decided that he didn't want to hear that information, and finally the fact that Kenjaku waited specifically until after Yuji Itadori's grandpa was dead in order to actually begin his plan and set up the situation for Yuji to swallow the finger. It leads me to at least somewhat believe that it could be possible that Yuji's grandpa was the reason why Kenjaku both waited this long to actually start his plan to begin with, but more importantly, he is the reason why Kaori didn't actually raise Yuji Itadori. Now finally, we also know there is something very, very special about both sides of the Yuji Itadori family bloodline. After all, like I talked about in another video about how Yuji is going to awaken anti-gravity, Kenjaku specifically chose to take Kaori Itadori's body, but also chose to stay with the Itadori family in order to make Yuji Itadori, implying at least to me that both parents are very, very crucial to the creation of Yuji Itadori and his potential, which might actually lead to Yuji's grandpa maybe being some incredibly potent and powerful sorcerer that we don't really know much about up to this point, that might actually be much, much stronger than we really think. After all, in my opinion, if this theory ends up being true, that it's actually because of the fact that Yuji's grandpa was around that Kenjaku had to wait so long, there are one of two ways that I could see being the potential reason of why Kenjaku waited so long because of him. Number one, a binding vow that was formed between himself and Kenjaku, where the binding vow was that Kenjaku wouldn't be allowed to do anything towards Yuji until he died. However, I don't believe that that theory is true at all, mainly because of the fact that we know Kenjaku does actually have a way to exploit binding vows that are specifically made between two people, mainly because binding vows are linked to the body, not really the person itself, and that's how Kenjaku has managed to escape binding vows and their consequences before by swapping bodies after he ended up double-crossing the binding vow. Which leads me to the second possibility, which might just be that Yuji Itadori's grandpa is actually probably just much stronger than we know up to this point, and that Yuji Itadori's grandpa might have actually been so powerful that Kenjaku was like, okay, I'm not messing with that, I'm going to specifically wait until you die in order to begin my plan. After all, when you really look at it, there is no reason at all for Kenjaku to have waited this long. Even if you think he did actually need to get Geto's body before beginning his plan, that is still an extra year he had to begin his plan, and there's no reason why he waited this specifically long and a year long in order to begin his plan, let alone the fact that Kenjaku's original plan likely didn't even involve Geto in order to start the Culling Games, and just Geto was an accident that happened that ended up making his plan just significantly easier to happen. Now you might be wondering this though, how could a sorcerer that is strong enough down to the point where Kenjaku doesn't want to mess with him remain hidden about so long? After all, it doesn't seem like anyone actually knows anything about the Itadori family up to this point, and my simple answer to that is, how did Kenjaku and Miguel stay hidden for so long? It's not like the sorcerers are aware of everything, they need to do research on these types of things, so someone like the Itadori family who are not really doing anything at all staying hidden for this long makes a lot of sense. Furthermore, we also know that even one member of the Itadori family, being Kaori Itadori, had the anti-gravity technique, which no one was aware of, and yet they still managed to stay hidden for this long. It could even be possible that Kaori Itadori had access to reverse curse technique, allowing her to use both applications, and yet she was still not known about. Not everything is known about in the sorcerer world. So I want to hear what you guys think about this in the comment section down below. Do y'all think that it could be possible that Yuji's grandpa is the reason why Kenjaku had to wait for so long, and that Yuji's grandpa is secretly some top 5 level of sorcerer in the verse and is secretly one of the strongest? Or that I'm reaching a little bit and the only real reason of why Kenjaku waited so long was because Gege didn't predict that Kenjaku would end up being Yuji's parent and decided to make that decision later in. I'm going to leave that decision up to you, or maybe there is some third reason of why Kenjaku waited so long that I'm not actually accounting for in this video, and why Kenjaku didn't choose to adopt Yuji Itadori and raise Yuji Itadori as his own that I'm not actually thinking of in this video. So I want to hear what you guys think in the comment section down below. Remember, while you're down there, to subscribe if you like anime content like this, and I'm gonna see y'all later. Peace.